Are you ready for homeschooling to feel joyful again? Do you want to build closer relationships, remove some of the stress around planning, and enjoy learning with your children? Welcome to Your Morning Basket. I'm Pam Barnhill, a homeschool mom just like you, and I'm going to show you the magic and fulfillment that morning basket or morning time can bring to your homeschool. Grab your coffee or tea and let's get started. Hey there. Okay, so this week, I'm having to stop these ladies already today because they're trying to podcast with me before the podcast even begins. They're so excited about the topic and everything that they want to tell you. I'm here with two members of the Your Morning Basket team. And I think, Ali, you've been on the 10 Minutes to a Better Homeschool podcast before, but this is your first time on Your Morning Basket. So tell us who you are.
So my name is Ali. I am a homeschool mom of 4 kids. Their ages are 10, 8, 6, and 4. And I've loved being part of the team. You might have chatted with me a little bit in the DMs on social media or seen me around the community.
Yeah. And what else do you do? You're kind of our social media liaison. And then what else do you do for the team?
And now I've started helping with writing the Little Explorers and some of the exploration plans. And I've absolutely loved that too.
Okay. I'm so glad you said that you loved it. And then our next team member here with me today is somebody you are very familiar with because she's been on the podcast a number of times. And it is Miss Laney Homan. Laney, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Good morning. I am Laney Homan. I am the Member Success Manager here at Your Morning Basket. And I have been homeschooling. This will be my 19th year homeschooling. I have 8 kids, but I am down to only 4 still homeschooling. So it's really a surreal season right now as we're decreasing in number rather than increasing in number.
Isn't that crazy? Like that is such a crazy feeling, you know?
It is. It's kind of delightful. But there's like this bittersweetness to it, right? But the things are simplifying as we get fewer students. And that's kind of nice. Like I said, we're really able to dive in and stay. The kids I have now are really closer in age. So I have an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, and a 13-year-old. Yeah. So we have a year off of high school. I've taught high school since like 2012, I think. And this is the first year I haven't had a high schooler. So.
And that's crazy, but you know it's coming again.
Oh yeah, next year. I mean, I have 1 year.
I have 1 year.
So, but awesome. Yeah, no, it's great. We're loving it.
That's so good. Okay. So I have to make a note to myself that we're going to have to send Laney a medal next year when she reaches her 20th year of homeschooling to celebrate. What an accomplishment that is for sure. All right. So today we are talking about, I didn't tell you guys, but we started a new feature on the podcast and we're calling it, I can't remember what we're calling it now. I recorded with the girls last week and this could totally be out of order because we don't necessarily record these in order. We have to record them when they fit in everybody's schedule. And right now it's like 8 a.m. Morning time musings. And I've been asking some questions about what's going on in your morning time. So just really quick, Ali, can you tell me something that has been working really well for you in your morning time this fall?
Yes, singing hymns has been something that has been working really well, or just song in general. We didn't have any music in our morning time for the longest time, and I would listen to podcasts with Pam, and every time I was so inspired to put music in, and it actually took me to getting together in person at the Gather retreat to put music in my morning time. They're in all the plans. It's in the explorations. It's all there for me. We finally added it and it's made such a difference in our moods in our morning time, especially moms.
Especially moms. Oh, I love it. I love it so much. And it's interesting. You mentioned the Gather retreat because that is now open. So go check that out and see if we have any spots left. I'll put the link for you in the show notes to that because that Gather retreat last year in January at the beach, which don't freak out. We're in Florida. So it really was lovely down there.
It was absolutely lovely.
Yeah, so much fun. So come join us. All right, Laney, what's working for you?
I'm going to say our read alouds. Like I don't know. That's my love. And so I feel like read alouds are always one of those things that I connect with my kids on. And, we're reading a super fun book right now, and they just are loving the silliness of it. And, that really, it's the last thing we do in our morning time every day. And so they come to the table, and we also do music in our morning time. That's how I get everybody to the table, is with the music. And we have a lengthy playlist because we're slow moving people here. But, each of the kids gets to choose a song. So everybody has something they love. And, so music gets the attitude set, and everybody comes to the table, and then we end with a read aloud, and that's something that they're always excited about. So read alouds are always the thing that I love in my homeschool. That's probably the thing that has lasted the years.
I love it. Okay, so I have already shared something, so now I have to come up with something else again. I'm going to say the Hallow app is one of our things. And so this is a Catholic prayer app because our family is Catholic. And there's so many different little devotionals and prayers and scripture readings, and even multiple versions of like the daily scripture readings and stuff like that. And there are varying links, and then different people who are reading them. So like my family watches The Chosen, and Jonathan Rumi is like, he plays Jesus on The Chosen, and he's just awesome. And there's somewhere he reads, and the kids love that. And then there's somewhere like Mark Wahlberg reads, and, just all of these different, you get such a variety of voices. And then there are our favorite longtime readers on there. So like, which is the female voice. And so we can just pick, we have a variety of things to choose from. And so we pick these little, like we'll do like a 30-day devotional or something, and they're 3 minutes long. They're absolutely perfect. Some kind of great little insight. And it just kind of changes things up quite a bit. So so the Hallow app, we like it.
Oh, I know something that was cool, because I've heard everybody talk about it, but we had never done it. We started it last week, actually. And the kids were like, let's do this every day, was the World from A to Z. Mm-hmm. The Carl Azouz.
That was my thing last time. Yeah.
So they last week I finally opened that and started it. And then it generated great discussions. Like they loved it. And, there was the episode had kind of he said this story isn't for the squeamish, and I have a very squeamish daughter. So she was a little like, I'm not sure that I'm like on board with this, but then it quickly moved into other things that she got interested in. So, but yeah, I was like, okay, is this like a daily thing or a once a week thing? And they were like, most of them were like daily, let's do it daily. So now I have to remember.
And we saw that episode, and it really wasn't for the squeamish. So. Yeah,
he gave a warning, and her brothers were all like, "Don't listen, Molly."
My kids are finally old enough. I remember everyone raving about him and not being able to watch yet. And then he left, and now Carl's back, and we're so excited. We're doing it. We're listening at lunch.
Oh, I love it. Love it. Okay, well, let's move into our topic of conversation for today. And this is one of those episodes that I would call like a shameless promo for what we do in Your Morning Basket Plus. But we really wanted to do this episode because there very well could be a mom out there. This is what's on my heart for doing this particular episode. There very well could be a mom out there who is really struggling, juggling all the balls in her homeschool, like all the spinning plates, and she's like frantically running from plate to plate, trying to keep them spinning with multiple kids and thinking, how can I do this and not be a failure? And I think this episode does that. This episode possibly gives a tool that could help with that. And that's why I want to do it. And so the idea is we have these things in Your Morning Basket Plus. They're lesson plans, and they're called explorations is what they're called. And the idea is that you are exploring a topic in depth in your morning time each and every month. And some people have said like, oh, they're unit studies. And I don't think they're unit studies at all, because you don't learn everything there is to know about a topic necessarily. And unit studies typically don't focus on what we call the truth, goodness, and beauty of a topic. So these plans include music, they include art. Even when we did, I remember one of our earliest sets was George Washington Carver, and somebody wrote us an email and they were kind of upset. They were like, this is not a unit study. And we're like, no, they're not. And we tell you they're not. This is about his favorite hymns and his favorite poems and stuff like that. And we're like, yes. But I think they're just a great, beautiful way to explore a lot of things about a topic. And then if you want to kind of make them into a little bit more, the book list is extensive. And so we wanted to talk today about how you could use these explorations really as the heart of an elementary homeschool curriculum. And so, Laney, I'm going to let you talk to that, because this idea kind of came from you.
Yeah. So several years ago, we wanted something to be a little different in our homeschool. And I had bought a new curriculum. I bought a curriculum that we were super excited about. It contained science and history, art and geography, and it was all laid out. And I spent like a good portion of my time that summer planning out everything and getting it all ready to go. And then I was like, but I'm going to do these explorations just as like a little intro to our morning time. Because I think that'll be like really fun, and it'll just be kind of in addition to like doing this other curriculum that we had. But when we started the school year, like the explorations just became the thing. And we stopped using the other curriculum very shortly after the school year started, because I was seeing my kids really maybe for the first time, where I was recognizing it, making connections on their own. And I think it became something that was coming directly from the explorations, because so many other curriculums that I had used were really spoon feeding things in a chronological order, or like they were tying events and people and places all to the same, like they were making those connections for the kids. But my kids would just really get intrigued with this topic that was introduced, and we would just kind of dive into it. So we did try to do really extensive use of the book lists, and then, doing the activities. What I loved about it was focused on that truth, goodness, and beauty that I was really had this picture of using in our homeschool. But when combined with the book list, and we were actually really finding that we were studying history, we were studying science, we were studying current, famous people and events, and like all of these different subject areas, we were learning about different places. And it was just something that they got intrigued enough by that we just didn't have time for the other curriculum. They just spent so much time dwelling there. And so they were so excited about it. And then the monthly topic was something that really excited them, because it was like, well, we've done this. Okay, so what's the next topic? It wasn't just this really long drawn out, okay, we're still just moving through the timeline of history or thing, which can be very exciting, but it was enough of a change for my kids. We spent at least a full year only doing the explorations. I just set the other curriculum to the side, and we just had the best time with explorations. And when I say that they started making connections, it was actually the George Washington Carver. This was several years ago. So those kids I was talking about just a minute ago, they were a little bit younger. The George Washington Carver explorations was the first time my kids were ever introduced to the topic of slavery. They were really young, and George Washington Carver was a slave when he was young. He was born into slavery. And in his reading some of the picture book biographies, it led them to be asking some questions, and they were really intrigued by this. whole concept in a way that was not, they were like shocked by it, I guess. But we learned so much about this. And then it was probably 6 months later, we did an exploration about cowboys, which they were absolutely loving. But again, in that exploration, we read about a rodeo cowboy, and he had been an ex-slave, and they were like, oh, this is like George Washington Carver. Like, they started making those connections on their own. They were picking up these concepts, and I was noticing that it was just happening all over the place. Like, one thing would be introduced in an exploration, and then a completely different topic, completely different thing. And then they were making those connections, and they were making it not only with concepts, but they were making it with like events in history and time periods in history. And they were really getting a sense of how interconnected ideas are, and how that everything is not just an isolated thing. Like, and I think that helps them understand how the things that are happening in the world now are related to the things that happened in the past, or because they're drawing these conclusions on their own. And these are pretty young kids that we're talking about. They're so much more capable of doing that. And I was so intrigued by the different things that they were connecting that sometimes I wouldn't even think about, that we just kept doing it. Like, and sometimes the exploration topics would have an overlap in, like, maybe the same book would come up in another exploration because there was an overlap there, and we would read it again. And then they would be like, oh, I remember this from when we did it before. And so there's that constant kind of reviewing of ideas, because every time they make a connection, then they kind of like they rehash, somebody saying, oh, remember when? And then they go through exactly what we were doing then. And then sometimes that'll take them on a little journey of talking about what they had learned about before. So it's helping them to make connections between people and events and all kinds of historical and scientific ideas. But then it's also like a great way to review, because every time they make those connections, they're going back to the things that they had learned previously. They're not just pushing that to the side as something that they once encountered and are no longer encountering those ideas.
I love it.
And they just flourished with it. So we just kept going. And we just stayed there for a really long time.
So we've hinted at this a little bit. Actually, Laney's hinted at a number of different topics when she was telling us about this. Ali, what are some of the different topics that we've done in explorations? And I'm going to be honest here. Explorations came along after my kids got older. And so we don't do a set of explorations each month. Now, I am subscribed to the text service that we have in Your Morning Basket Plus. And so we send out a daily text with an explorations activity in it each and every day, which is fabulous for people like me who just want to dabble in the explorations. And so the text comes across and I can say, oh, that looks like something my teenagers would enjoy, that, and we've done things like sing some of the songs, or at least listen to some of the songs, and like look at the usually like some of the artwork will catch our eye, or something like Japanese tea garden, or some of the photos, like the really close up photos of the bugs and stuff like that. So my kids were kind of beyond this stage by the time explorations came along. So Ali, tell me about some of the topics that are there.
Right. So our favorite, the one that pulled us in, because my 3 oldest are boys, is there was a month of baseball. And I was asking my kids, okay, what do you love best about explorations? And they still all say baseball. And even for me, so they just wanted to go outside and play baseball, which was fun. It inspired us even to bring in like spelling words, just throwing the baseball back and forth and bringing the skill subjects. But when we did baseball, we took that whole month to learn about the history of baseball, memorize Casey at the bat, there's just so much richness. Like Lainey was saying, when you take one topic and then you pull in these common threads of memory work and poetry and art appreciation, and fun projects doing together and using their creativity. So baseball is the one that pulled us in. And we've had explorations on ponds, the zoo. When I was thinking back about what I wanted to say about last year, I don't remember a single math lesson that sticks out or a single skill lesson that sticks out. But I completely remember when we listened to the video from the explorations on Henry Rousseau and then painted pictures or drew pictures of tigers. And then later that year, when we went to a museum, my youngest kid's recognizing, his artwork. And I remember this clearly. And my kids too, they don't remember a specific subject, but they definitely remember when we were outside playing baseball and reading about the history of baseball. And with the pond explorations, they were encouraged to have a pet turtle for a month. We had a pet turtle outside. And so I think all the topics that they're so unique, they cross a broad span. We try to hit everything. Coming up, we have fairy tales right now, trains, mountains, Australia, trying to do a broad range. I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is it's going to be the things you remember with your kids. So something that you're going to look back and make memories with are these explorations.
I love that. And I just want to say that we did not encourage you to have a pet turtle. Your kids were encouraged by the pond unit to have a pet turtle. No, nowhere in the explorations did it say you should really get a pet turtle.
No, it didn't. They had so much fun learning about ponds. And then I think there's a property back behind our house and Dad found a turtle. And then I was making the connections like, oh, this goes perfect with books we're reading.
Yeah, we're all about making your life easier, trust me. And getting a turtle, that would not necessarily be it. Okay.
That's true. I will second that. They're not all the hands-on busy, no, they're just so full of beautiful things. I think, one of the things that jumped out to me is the things that Ali was talking about in several of the ones that we've mentioned and the topics we've mentioned. I am a little like Pam. I've heard her talk about the fact that she really likes nature study to take place indoors. And I've never, I love the concept of nature study, but I'm not usually one that's really out there, getting out into nature to do. I will for certain things, but it's not ever been something that has made its way into our homeschool as a consistent practice. But I love the way that the explorations introduce nature study to us it's just one of the topics that's covered in every single exploration. And so even the George Washington Carver ones that we were talking about, he was a naturalist. And so there was a lot of nature study type stuff in there as we were I remember learning about the peanut plant, and we were looking at some of his illustrations for the peanut plant and seeing, how great they were. And we were studying them not only as nature study, but also as artwork in that particular exploration. And I think that there's just been so many things. So I would say for our family in particular, the picture studies and the nature study are things that that's something that is now a consistent habit in our home because of the explorations introducing them in a very gentle way that doesn't seem overwhelming. Because I can get on board with watching a YouTube video about a particular, nature study topic, and we can make a nature study page. But like Ali said, it does pique curiosity to take that outside of your home. But I'm not the mom who's going to take it outside of my home first and then bring it into my home. But we 100% will, give the kids the freedom to take the ideas that they're exploring inside of the explorations and then work that out in their lives, whatever that means sometimes. So I don't remember if it was the Cowboys exploration or recently we did Pioneer. So I know, and it would have gone with that. But one day I looked out my kitchen window and my kids had built a stick fort and had they were having full on pretend out there. and they were living the pioneer life. Like it might have been from the Cowboys. They had like a stick fort built, and they were pretending to camp, and they had a wagon, and they were like just totally immersed in this subject that I had nothing to do with. Like the whole pet turtle thing. It's like, it does spark an interest in whatever it is. And I think that one of the things that I have loved about that is that seeing my kids really just kind of engage in that. But the beautiful thing is that because the topic changes every single month, they're like, they can live there, and then they don't really get bored with it, because then all of a sudden there's a new topic, and then they're like, oh, and then, they get involved in that, and they get to really kind of live there and study and explore that idea.
There is a new topic, but the way we approach the topic stays the same. And you guys have both alluded to this, like Laney, you're saying we're so much more confident doing, picture study, or now we actually get nature study done. And I do think it's important that these things come around in every single set of plans. So in every set of plans, there is going to be music appreciation. There is going to be some poetry, some memorization, some picture study. We always put jokes in them and things like that. Okay, I have to ask you, Ali, since you were talking about baseball earlier, was there nature study in baseball, or did she use science in that one?
Oh, yes. So I think it was science. I think she pulled in, there was actually a great book of like the physics and some math about baseball and baseball diamonds, and my boys like that. I think that is, but I would have to look back. Maybe it was mascots or something. It could be some nature study then.
Yeah, sometimes it is, we're like, okay. And I know one of the things we've got coming up next, this coming school year, is currency, which I thought was a fascinating topic I haven't looked at that set of explorations yet to see what you guys came up with. But that would have been Jessica Lawton who had written that set of explorations. But it always works. And that's the thing that is kind of fascinating to me. And it always works, honestly, without having to stretch too much. And so I love the fact that these certain methods of studying something like the picture study or the music appreciation come back time and time again, across all of these different topics. And it's stuff that kids love.
It is. Well, and I think what's interesting, you started by, pointing out these are not unit studies. And I think one of the things that distinguishes them from unit studies is the fact that we're not making those connections for the kids, but that there is this content that naturally occurs about these topics. It is not some like contrived lesson plan based upon a topic.
Yeah.
So you're not trying to come up with activities of like, okay, baseball is my theme, so how can I incorporate baseball into every lesson that I'm doing?
Right.
Let me give you a writing assignment that's centered around baseball. You're not trying to force the topic onto things. We start with topics when we're writing, and then we go out and we look for all of these good, beautiful, and true resources that are already existing about these topics. And that's what makes them work so well. But it does, every set of explorations generally contains the same subject material that you would find in any of the Your Morning Basket plans. Right. They're just not laid out by subject. We give you a list of things to do, and it's going to be all mixed up in there. You're going to have your poetry. You're going to have your nature study. You're going to have picture study. You're going to have music appreciation. Usually there's some kind of art project to do with your kids that is hands-on. In any and all of it is optional, but it comes together in a much more natural way than trying to create assignments that mesh with a particular topic.
Yeah.
You're just exploring it in a way that it's almost like, I believe it's Susan Wise Bauer that encourages you to, like, when your kids are young and you're wanting them to explore the world around them, to give them give them like a jewelry loop, to like a magnifying glass or a microscope, to give them things to help change the perspective of how they view something.
Ooh.
Is they're exploring their world. And the explorations kind of serve that purpose. They give us a different way to look at something, to explore it from a different angle. So you might not all of a sudden think like George Washington Carver, oh, there's poetry, or there's like, but there is. And when we start to look at things through a different lens in order to view it, we see something completely different than if we had just like studied something as an isolated topic in a particular subject matter. So like insects, for example. You mentioned earlier looking at those zoomed in insects, those photographs of insects. This was one of the activities in the insects exploration was exploring the photography of a man, I don't even remember his name, but that he had photographed with a microscope these insects so that you could see them on an incredible magnified scale. And they were gorgeous.
They were.
And they were phenomenal. And that's also one of my big memories from that. My kids looked at it and pored over it. But I would not have thought insects and art. Like, that's not a connection that I would have made, but that connection somebody else had made. And so all I did was show my kids these things, and they just had a beautiful experience looking at, observing, and learning about something that otherwise would have really just been like, okay, we're covering this in your science curriculum. And we might have learned that, insects have 6 legs and 3 body segments, but they wouldn't have really understood insects in the world the same way that they do now, that they've studied it from a different perspective.
Well, we talk about sometimes as the team brainstorms, like, what are the topics going to be for the explorations? These conversations can get quite heated at times as we're talking about it. And we talk about, my line is always, there has to be romance to the subject. Like, you can't, because I know after we did baseball, everybody was like, oh, baseball was such a hit. We need to do like, I'm going to pick on soccer and the world's going to hate me, but we need to do soccer. And I'm like, there's just no romance to soccer. But it always like surprises me. Actually, Colleen Ryan, one of our longtime members in Your Morning Basket Plus, said when the sharks came out, she's like, oh, truth, goodness, and beauty about sharks. And Pam's over here saying, hold my Diet Coke, with that, hold my alcoholic beverage line. But we do come up with those kinds of, we work hard at that. And then we don't work hard at it, because I think sometimes if the topic doesn't lend itself to truth, goodness, and beauty, there have been some topics we've abandoned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, but speaking of soccer, I just finished writing Brazil. You'll find soccer.
Okay.
I think if you're Brazilian, you might say there's a lot of romance around soccer.
I understand that's my purely American take on soccer, and the fact that we really did try to like it and just couldn't get into it. But yeah. Okay. So before everybody hates me about soccer, let's move on to this. The thought about when we say that the explorations can be your elementary curriculum, let's get practical for a few minutes. So first of all, we're not saying that it's going to replace your math or your handwriting or your composition or anything like that. That's not what the explorations were designed for. And I talk about the difference, and we'll link in the show notes for you an episode of the 10 Minutes to a Better Homeschool podcast that I've done about the difference between skill subjects and content area subjects. So you are still going to have to do skill subjects with the young kids in your home, actually with all the kids in your home. They do skill subjects until they leave your home. So, they're still going to have to learn to read, and they're still going to need to do their math and things like that. But what do you guys think the explorations can replace?
I think they can replace for elementary, they can be your science, they can be history, art, everything art, and extras there too with music appreciation. I really think if you take a look at it, it can be everything other than the skill subjects. Because my first grader, for example, he only has the attention span for math and phonics of like maybe 15 to 20 minutes each. And you can think at the end of the day, he's in first grade and that's only adding up to 45 minutes of our day. Where's the rest? And it's all here. It's at the end of the day when you lay down and did I do enough? I always have the feeling when we do full explorations and a full morning time that there's been enough because of all that richness there. And then, that voice in your head that can be saying, oh, are you doing enough? Is this enough? It's always these times when you see the youngest ones, like name a pet Leonardo da Vinci or point something out in the house that they noticed from artwork on the wall, that then you're feeling like, oh, they're getting so much goodness. And it's from these. So I really think there could be an argument that these explorations could be your entire content subject curriculum for the elementary years.
Yeah.
I think it's so true because sometimes as a young mom with only young kids, I think that somebody would have been hard pressed to get through my brain that this would have been enough. But it's through years of seeing the results of this approach. And I've used other approaches before. So like I have that comparison and this works so incredibly well. And so here's an example. So my 8th grader, this year, he's my only kid in our homeschool this year that's actually using a curriculum that's outside of Your Morning Basket resources. And we are using a science curriculum for him, as I wanted to kind of prepare him for high school science. And interestingly, I was like, we haven't done any formal science. So like, I don't really know where to begin. So as I was researching science curriculum and I started looking and I was like, oh, but we've covered that topic and we've covered that topic. Like we had covered all of the basis of elementary science in just using the explorations and the resources and the books and things like that. And I was really, it was like, as I was researching for what we were going to do for his outside science curriculum, that I began to recognize as a whole, like, oh, that he has had this stuff. Yeah. But my initial reaction when I sat down to research was he's had no science, like formal science. So what are we going to, like, where are we going to start as I prepare him? And then all my research did was give me a lens to show me that he's actually been really well prepared for it. And by doing the thing that we're talking about, and that is just having this really rich morning time that includes all of these different topics and subjects that they're hitting across, the different, like span of time. It just wasn't laid out for him in a way that was like, this is a science curriculum, but the content was in there and they were able to, and he's having no trouble at all, entering into a more formal curriculum style thing that he is now working from because he's got such a great background of the information that has been laid before him through different activities and books and other things. And most of that came from the exploration. So this child, my 13-year-old, he's the one of all of my kids who probably has had most of his elementary school with nothing more than the explorations or additional plans from the Your Morning Basket subscription and the resources available inside Your Morning Basket.
So let me ask you guys this question, because so somebody may be listening and they may be thinking, okay, you're convincing me that doing things this way would be easier on me and that my kids would get this great education from it. But I have, Laney, you're talking about your 13-year-old. So last year he was 12 and then you probably had another one who was like 7, and there's still a bit of a difference between a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. And I think one of the mindsets that a lot of moms come to this with is, how can I give my first grader and my 7th grader the same work and it be appropriate? How can I really do this together as a family? So, and Ali, I know you've got like a preschooler and an 11-year-old. What do you say to that?
I say totally for these subjects, you totally can, because it's a topic where each of their little minds is taking it in right at their level. So if you're looking at a piece of artwork together and you're doing picture study, what your preschooler sees and what your 5th grader sees is unique to them, but they're both getting something very significant from it. One of my favorite parts actually is having them together for this. I think not only what they're learning, but the relationships they're developing with each other is so amazing to see. So my preschooler will pick a topic from the Little Explorers, like when we were doing the zoo, to build a zoo. And you'd think the other kids would want to just scatter, but they want to help that youngest one. And one of the best ways that you can tell your kids are learning is when they can teach somebody else. So I think it's so cool to see my 5th grader then teach her how to build the zoo and what the different animals would eat or what you would do to care for them in his own way is learning and showing what he has learned by being able to teach her. So I like to see the span and the relationships between all my kids when we do a topic and what each one is taking from it, or even teaching or guiding the younger ones.
Yeah. Well, and I think something else that I've seen in our homeschool is it gives them a sense of connection between each other as well, because they have something that they can discuss together. They have something that they can interact with together, as opposed to having big kids that do one thing, having little kids do another thing, and there's no commonality there. What I have found is that those little kids can then have conversations with their older siblings about things. And like Ali said, it's at a different level. They're taking it in on their own way, but it's not uncommon for my youngest to give insight into something that the rest of us might have missed, because again, they're looking at it through different eyes at a different stage of their life. And it's really a beautiful thing to see. And I certainly, in regards to like, we get the question a lot, like, are explorations enough? And, are these appropriate for my high schoolers? Those kinds of things. And Pam has kind of mentioned this. She doesn't really dive in deep with the explorations, but there's still things in there that they do with their kids that are in high school. But I tell people all the time, I enjoy the explorations.
Oh, yeah.
Every single month, I find stuff that I'm learning, pictures I've never looked at, poetry I've never heard. Like, I'm engaged in these explorations. So who am I to think that if there's not new stuff for me as, an older mom, then why would I think that my teenagers or my older elementary kids can't gain something of richness and beauty from them? So I think that's one of the things that always is a testimony to me, like it for whether something is appropriate for my older kids, because we often get an idea of what it needs to be. And we think, oh, well, this isn't enough, or this is too babyish. But what I find is that, like, if I'm enjoying this and find beauty in that, then it's surely they can too. Like, it's there. It's not something that it has to do with the fact that we're finding things and we're pulling them in around a particular subject, but those things already exist. Things aren't being created falsely to fit around a particular subject. Right. And so it is not an age graded thing. Beautiful artwork is not meant for a 16-year-old or a 3-year-old or a 45-year-old. Beautiful artwork is meant for everyone. And so the types of materials and activities that we're bringing in are designed that way. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to find some activities that your older children might roll their eyes at, but a younger child might really, really enjoy. But overall, though, the content inside is something that is really rich for all ages. And that's one of the things
we do have the level ups too. You know, we haven't even mentioned that a lot of times we'll have an activity that, you know, is kind of a general activity, and then we level it up in some way, which kind of leads me to my next question. You know, the level up will have something about doing some research or something like that for the older kids. You know, one of the things that I think might come up for some parents is this idea, and this is such a, I'm going to call it a false public school mindset. This idea that our kids have to be producing something to show that they've learned, you know? And so I know from using the explorations that I think one of the things people get hung up on is the fact that there's not a lot of production. You don't get done with a set of explorations and you don't have this whole packet of worksheets or this composition or something that you've written. And Laney, I know that you've used the explorations with older kids. So how do you get around that fear or worry?
Right. Well, and I think that's definitely just a mindset shift that I had somewhere along the way. I think it's the conversations that I have with my kids that clue me into the fact that they're actually engaging with this material, and I'm comfortable with the level of how they're interacting with it and what they're remembering. And so that's one thing. And we talked about that earlier when I was talking about hearing how my kids were making connections, and then they're bringing up stuff they studied 6 months ago. And that is, or a year ago. And that to me is evidence of the fact that it's soaking into them. They're remembering things. When I actually used some of the explorations and some of the plans for membership with my 16-year-old last year when she was in high school, and she would just take topics that we had studied and then go and learn more about them. She would, you know, I would just give her an assignment, or she was really self-driven. So sometimes she would just like pick a topic and then go and do something on her own. But with other kids, sometimes I would pick something that I thought, okay, this maybe sparked a little bit of interest, or at least leaves the door open for quite a bit more research and diving into. So I will give that child an assignment that is more research based or something like that, where then they can go, and then I'll ask them to present that information to me in some way. So sometimes it's come back to morning time and teach the other kids what you've learned. And like Ali said, when they've learned it and interacted with it and can teach it to other people, that's a great way to measure what they are learning. But then sometimes it would be, you know, write me a paper on this, or can you make a slideshow presentation, or like some way that I have some kind of idea that you have interacted with the material and can then like give it back to me in a way that I can tell that you have knowledge and understanding of the material that you have read. And I have found that that is so much more effective than giving you an objective test that you're just going to like, you know, fill in the blank or do multiple choice, or even doing short answer questions sometimes. It lets me know where the material is hitting a level of understanding with those kids, because I'm not giving them a specific thing to report back on. I'm giving them maybe a topic and then telling them like, whatever is kind of, where is this resonating with you? You've taken this information in. How are you processing it and communicating that? And that works on, that really truly does overlap into the skill subjects when I'm interacting with my teens that way, because that's all about communication. That's how we process information. And that's applicable to everything that we ever have as input. How are you taking input from social media? How are you taking input from your email inbox, or from like any source of input that we have in this world today? How are you processing that? And then, you know, handling that information and putting it back out, or communicating it to others in ways that is needed. That's a skill we need across the board. So by using the explorations and the other Your Morning Basket plans, and then giving my high schoolers assignments that require them to think and then communicate what they have processed about that, is giving them skills far beyond just introduction to truth, goodness, and beauty. And it seems to have worked really well for my kids that had high school in that model. Like I said,
for the elementary kids too, just what a weight off their shoulders that they don't need all of that. Like we don't at the end of the year have all of these worksheets and papers. And I don't think that my kids miss that. I think that it's gives them a chance to just enjoy and to not maybe suck some of the fun out of things when they can just sit at the table and their only responsibility is to sketch a picture of what we're reading about or looking about or talking about. I think that they absolutely love that.
Yeah, I think so. And it's way more effective than you would have maybe first thought. Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about the explorations and just hopefully be an encouragement to moms out there who are like, I've got this 5th grader and he's doing ancient history, and I've got this 3rd grader who's doing American history, and I've got this 1st grader, and oh my gosh, he's not doing anything because I never have time to pull it all together. How can we make this better for our family? And I really, really do think explorations is the way to do that. So thanks for being an encouragement today. Thanks so much for listening to Your Morning Basket. If you are ready to spend less time planning and more time engaged in learning with your children, join Your Morning Basket Plus, a monthly membership with everything you need to start a morning time practice in your homeschool. To join, head on over to ymbplus.com and I'll see you there.